Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, brothers and sisters, mothers and fathers, aunts and uncles and cousins, of course, and grandmothers and grandfathers, or if you prefer, grandmothers and grandfathers. I'm running out of things to call them, guys. If you've got other suggestions, please send them my way. Hello, everyone. My name is Graham Knight. Welcome to the Valley Baseball League podcast. For tonight, we're talking dynasties. A couple different families have a couple different generations involved, and tonight we're gonna take a look at the multi-generational approach to a Valley Baseball League team. Let me set the stage for you, though. Let me say a couple names for you, see if these jump out at you. How about Benjamin Dumm, Eric White? How about Simon Landry, Zach Peak? How about Tyler Yankowski, Brandon Caranta? How about Brad Zebedis? How about all that? How about Neal? How about Neal? Does the Neal family name ring a bell? Well, let me introduce you to three of the Neals. One from each of the last two generations. Say hi in no particular order to Matt, if you'd be so kind as to wave for us. Say hi to Parker.
Hello.
And then say hi to the grandpapa, Jay Neal. Jay, since we're always talking about grandmothers and grandfathers, let's get the hard questions out of the way. You've got grandkids now, right?
Correct.
What do they call you?
Pop.
Papa, and what do they call your wife?
Well, one calls her Dodo.
Dodo. All right. That's a new one. I haven't used that one yet.
She's gonna love it when she hears this. And the other calls her what? Mama, I think.
Mama. All right.
I think Matt's kids call her Mama.
Well, I'll go back and boys, I could have to say the whole thing, so I'm going to spare you that right now. So there's so much I want to talk to you guys about. Jay, we were talking about a legal matter for the Valley League. I was asking you about some of the branding, some other stuff. And you wrote back kind of with smiles that you've only been involved with it for 12 years. Let's do this. We interviewed you about a month or so ago, and one of the things you said, which really touched me, was you said that you and your wife would have given your, it was either right or both arms for your boys to play some more baseball. Why baseball? Let's start there. Why aren't your kids playing football or soccer or volleyball? We talked to Rick Spires the other day. He played volleyball. Why not hockey? Why baseball?
Well, I did hear recently that soccer is a gateway sport, and if you start soccer, then you go to lacrosse, and before long, you're doing all kinds of sports. So that's not a good thing. But actually, I did not push baseball on either of the two guys. They did the normal thing, T-ball, little league, and if they liked it, they liked it. If they didn't, they didn't. But I've always loved baseball. I would have loved to have played in college, but I wasn't good enough. I didn't have the talent. So it just kind of developed. Both of these guys turned out to be, they'll never say it, but they turned out to be really good high school athletes. And it looked like they had the ability to play in college, and it turned out they did. And it's a great experience. When they went off to college, I found that one of the great things about being self-employed is you can fix your schedule. So their coaches would get me the schedules in the fall, and my wife Tina and I would do my schedule a little bit. And I literally scheduled my law practice around the baseball games. And I probably missed about one game a year. Otherwise, we were driving all over the South. And it was a family experience. My wife and I would go and we'd talk about baseball and our sons all the way down. Nobody else wants to hear that, but your spouse can listen to it. And the guys both love baseball. They know a whole lot more about baseball than I ever knew, and they were far, far better at it than I ever was. But it's the sport that attracted them. Now, both of them, Parker played football and basketball. Matt played football and basketball as well. You'd have to ask them as to how they gravitated to baseball, but it wasn't something I didn't like, and it was a family thing for quite a few years with the Express. My wife also helps out, so it's kind of cool for me to be able to be involved with baseball and my sons, at the ripe old age of 66. I don't think that's a blessing that a lot of fathers get, and I'm very, very happy for it.
Well, so I'm going to ask them in just a second, but I want to ask you first, what do you think baseball taught them?
You don't, on a baseball field, you don't see attitudes very much. In other sports, you see a lot of trash talking. you see guys with, 15 pounds of jewelry. Never, baseball has its share of necklaces and things. But, there are attitudes that you see in other sports. Baseball coaches just don't tolerate it, and baseball players don't do it. Now, these guys that come to play for the Express in the summer, generally they're extremely well behaved to a fault. They're yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. Now, we're not stupid. When they're away from the adults, I'm sure they have their fun. I know they have their fun. But baseball players as a whole are extremely respectful and polite, more so than you see in some of the other sports. Not that the other sports are horrible, but baseball players always. And I think part of that might be that there are a lot of outstanding baseball players out there. And if you come with the attitude, the coach is just going to get somebody else. He does, unless you're one of those rare, Barry Bond type talent things, you're not going to get away with it. So baseball teaches a lot of respect, and that, I guess that's probably it.
And manners. I haven't heard that one before. And the reason I bring it up is one of the things that I've kind of coming to believe about baseball is I really think it is the perfect game in the sense that you have to be fast. You have to have good eye-hand coordination. You have to pay attention. It teaches concentration in a world where the attention span is like 8 seconds. All right, guys, let's open it up to you first, Parker. Dad says baseball taught you manners. What did it? So you played other sports. What did you learn from baseball that you might not have learned from the other sports you played?
Well, I would say I don't know what baseball players he's watched recently, but you still have plenty of attitudes out there between the white lines these days. Maybe not 20 years ago, but that's changed recently. But I wouldn't necessarily say baseball, just sports in general. I think the competitive nature has probably carried on from Matt, and we're both in the business world now, so it's probably paid dividends there. I still to this day, as Matt and Dad can attest to it, get pretty fired up about wins and losses and things like that. So I think the competitive nature, I think the respect for others and the sportsmanship side, and also I think baseball has an element of craftsmanship that maybe something like a football that is kind of brute strength and mostly physical attributes that doesn't have that. Baseball, there's a certain element to where lifting weights, being fast, running, it's only going to get you so far. There's kind of a craftsmanship to it as well. So that's kind of a nice feature that it teaches.
All right, craftsmanship. Matt, your turn. Anything you learned that your brother hasn't already mentioned?
Baseball and sports in general teach failure, and not acceptance of failure, but how to cope with failure and how to allow that to motivate and drive your successes. So if anything else, baseball especially teaches failure and patience.
Yeah, well, one thing on the failure and patience front is, I think part of being a game of failures is it teaches risk. I mean, to be an entrepreneur, you've got to take a risk. What I find interesting is we recently did an interview with Mike Garza. Mike was talking about coming out, and he just wanted to see if he could steal some bases. So he started taking risks. He ended up running up to 23 stolen bases in pretty much every league he played in after that. So, I mean, part of, in my mind, the failure is you got to be willing to take a swing at it. So let's go back 12 years, or maybe it was 13. What exactly inspired the Neal family? I'm guessing Dad started this to get involved with the Express. I know we talked about it a little bit in the podcast before, but I'm really kind of interested in tying together, Jay, your kind of perspective in your generation with your two sons. And then I'm interested to hear how you guys manage being a family and staying a family and managing a baseball team all at the same time.
I had watched the Valley League for years. I grew up a Newmarket Rebels fan. I'm still a little bit of a Newmarket Rebels fan. I root for the Rebels against anybody but us. Although I know this is heresy in Shenandoah County, I pull for Woodstock when they're not playing us because we're so close to the management of all the other teams in the county. There's a very close bond between the folks that run the teams. But I grew up a Rebels fan, went to a lot of their games. When my sons played college baseball, I was hopeful that they'd get a chance to play in the Valley Baseball League. And Matt played for Woodstock 2 years. Parker played for Newmarket 1 year, and then for Front Royal. It was fun to see my guys down there on the field. As far as, Strasburg's a baseball town. When both guys played for Coach Smoot was a very successful baseball coach. It was just a given that Strasburg was going to the regionals every year, and they pretty much did. And he had a really good program. He was a really good teacher of the game. So, Strasburg was a very strong, supportive town. And I've always loved baseball. And when I watch Valley League games, sometimes I would think, it would be cool to have this in Strasburg. So when the opportunity came, and Bruce Barnes and Frankie Connor, and Mike Whittle, we talked about it. But when the opportunity came up, we talked. And the neat thing was we just assumed we would get strong fan support and volunteers, because Strasburg as a town is great as far as people volunteering. All kinds of activities are supported in Strasburg. And I know other towns do that too. It's not exclusive. But we counted on that support. That was just a given. We thought we would get that, and we have gotten that. So that's where the idea came from. We basically bought Fauquier at a franchise, and they were not going to do it anymore. And so their franchise was available for sale. There was someone who knew I had talked about wanting the Valley League team. And so we were able to contact, they were willing to sell. A very nice place called Homewood Retirement Centers actually donated to us $5,000 to buy the franchise, because we started with $0. In fact, one of my wife's big concerns is, how much of our money are you putting into this? And I kept assuring her none. And please don't put me on a polygraph on that. Yeah, that would be trouble. But we were able to get the franchise. We had a year to get it up and running. We attracted and were able to get a lot of good volunteers, and just took off from there.
Yeah, let's pay tribute to your volunteers while we're at it. By my count, it's at least 65. Yeah. Anytime you can get an organization of 65 people to do anything, it's incredibly inspiring. So my hat's off to everybody in Strasburg that makes it work. No Valley Baseball League game takes place in a vacuum. So kudos to everybody in your town and all of the towns that make this happen. So take me back then to the point where, hey, Parker, hey, Matt, you guys want to help me manage this team? How did that happen?
Well, actually, you don't want to get those two around the word managing.
What is the word we use in the Neal household?
Yeah, that would, they give their opinions, and I usually hear them the next day. What was he thinking? Why in the world did he pitch him? He pitched it. So we have those discussions between ourselves, and that's okay. That's because, baseball is a great sport, because everyone can sit there and in their own mind, they can manage, well, you should have bunted, you should not have bunted, or whatever. So it's a great sport for that. But really, the first year that we had a team, Parker and Butch Barnes were going to do the recruiting of players. And to develop, Butch was very busy. He had become a realtor now that he was retired from being a police detective or sergeant, whatever he was. He was a deputy down in the Manassas area. Anyway, so as it turned out, Parker probably did 90% of the recruiting that year. And it was cold calls. He was making phone calls. Hi, I'm Parker Neal. We're a new team, was Strasburg Express. And, away it went. And he developed, good relationships with a lot of college coaches. And he has continued to nurture and grow that over all the years since then. And Matt has helped out some. They keep an eye on players and checking all that. They can describe that a whole lot more than I can. But Parker was involved in recruiting players from early on. Matt's on our board of directors. He's someone that it helps a little bit being a dad, because if you need help with the field or to do something, I can call, and he'll get there and help out. I know he feels like he probably doesn't do as much as the rest of us, just because he's on the board of directors and we've got very active day-to-day roles. But I would never tell him this except in this setting, but he's actually a pretty smart cookie. He's pretty bright about a whole lot of things. And so he is a great sounding board for a lot of things. The worst thing that he does is correct my writing. And anytime I write something to be on the internet or a story or something, I see a little note that says edited, which means Matt was there. And I remember these guys, not Parker so much, but I remember Matt struggling with some writing courses in college. And he developed into a great writer, but it's just, your son shouldn't be second guessing the father on his writings.
Oh, whoa. We got it. Matt, you want to jump on that one?
Well, I'm very picky about how our things appear in a public environment, and so when I see a post on Facebook or Twitter with comma splices or too many spaces, I make sure to correct those as soon as possible.
Yeah, well, good for you. So, talk to me. What is it like being the sons of a baseball mogul in Strasburg? What's that like? And is it better that is it really kind of cooperative? Is it all right? Okay, I don't want to argue with you anymore. You do recruiting and I'll do this. Matt, I know you're on the board, Matt, but give us the 5,000 foot, and then we'll dial into it with Parker for a closer.
Yeah, so Dad kind of summed it up best. I came on late, actually. When they first launched the Express, I was selling software in Dulles and Tyson's in D.C., and my hours were quite long. I didn't have time to commit to the Express of any sort. So really those first 3 or 4 years, it was entirely Parker doing the recruiting. So he gets all the credit in the world for that. He didn't have any contacts handed to him on a platter. He had to go through and find names and email addresses and cell phone numbers of every school via their website and contact them that way. Later on, I got involved, and my greatest role is I kind of tell Parker when to calm down, and I tell Dad when he needs to accelerate things a little bit. So those are by far my strengths and my greatest role for this organization.
So you're the throttle. All right.
For Dad.
So Parker, talk to me. What's it like being so Rich Fuller and his father, Brett? And I actually think, wasn't Brett's father involved in baseball somehow as well? I'm not really sure, but they're a multi-generational family working on the Percival Cannons. What is it like, father and son, working on a baseball team? Parker, talk to me. Is it easy? You guys end up butting heads a fair bit? I'm not looking for the family dirt. You don't have to dig any of that up. I'm just looking. I'll just tell you what I am looking for. We do occasionally come across people who are interested in starting a team. And so one of the things I'm kind of curious about is how it's worked for you. And then eventually we're going to end up at any advice you have for somebody looking at maybe starting a team in the Valley or something like that.
I would say it is fairly easy. I mean, it's a lot goes into it, especially on the recruiting side and whatnot, but it's been nice to have Matt and Dad on board. As Matt mentioned, he's kind of the intermediary between Dad and I. I'm probably the feistier of the three Neals, so I tend to get wound up a little tighter than the other. So but it's nice. As they mentioned, we kind of started from scratch, and at the time when we started a team, I had just finished collegiate ball myself in 2010. Our first year was 2011. So if you look at our first early rosters, a lot of it was colleges I played against in college. So a lot of Division III schools, a lot of smaller schools, just folks who, at least when I called them, would know the name. And then over the years, it's just kind of developed. And it's nice. Dad kind of leaves the recruiting up to me, as much as sometimes he may question some of the decision making or say roster size numbers that we sign. He kind of just lets us go and trust that by the time the kids get here, we'll have the right 30.
I'll say, and really, there's Dad obviously has a very important role. Parker's got a huge role. I do the social media and the website, but really the family part's critical. But as we discussed before, the volunteers really are the nucleus of what we do here in Strasburg.
Right. Hey, just to be clear, so I get that Matt's on the board and Parker's handling recruiting. Jay, define your role so everybody knows exactly what you do. I know we touched on it a little bit in the earlier podcast, but for somebody who hadn't seen that one yet, set the stage for kind of what your part of this all is.
It has changed a lot through the years. I mean, the first year, we were trying to get sponsors. We were trying to raise money. Parker and Butch are trying to sell to schools for players. So there was, literally, I'll tell you, the very first thing I did was called Bruce Alger. I love Bruce Alger. Bruce Alger is one of the finest people on the face of the planet. And he always has been, and he always will be, unless the Rebels beat us in the playoffs next year, and I reserve the right to change my opinion. But the first thing I did was call Bruce Alger, and we met for dinner one evening, and I took about 10 pages of notes just asking him questions. How do you do this? How do you do that? How much money do you need in the bank when you start? Where does it come from? When do you have to pay for the insurance? Where do you get your uniform? I mean, all the way through. I was just asking Bruce 1,000 questions. We were up at the Southern Kitchen in Newmarket. In fact, his sister was our waitress, so she was very patient with us hanging on to a booth for that long. But that's really where it started. And the Valley League, one great thing about it is the people that are running the teams, they get along very well. Everyone is glad to see each other. When we go to games, it's nice to see them. Of course, we love to beat them on the field, but everybody is willing to help anybody out. There's a lot of good camaraderie among the folks that have been there for a long time. And that has been really, really helpful. But I remember the first year, we had a year from when we got the franchise to our first game. And I would make to-do lists. And I remember one time I had about maybe 7 legal pad pages, single spaced, of things to do before we played our first game. And I remember I talked to Bruce Alger about 2 weeks before our opening night. And I had about a page worth left, maybe 25 entries of things to do before the opening game. And I was talking to Bruce, and as Bruce always does, he gave me some very wise words. He said, "You know what?" He said, "In 2 weeks, what are you going to do?" And I said, "Well, hopefully we're going to play a baseball game." He said, "You're going to play a baseball game." He said, "And if your list is complete, that's great. And if it's not, doesn't matter, because you're going to play a baseball game." And so that was kind of helpful from the chill standpoint. And the good thing was, as we got more and more volunteers, I mean, Butch Barnes has been very involved, and Frankie Connor. We have a secretary named Robin Hoddle who is phenomenal. Jan Bain has been a coordinator, trying to find players for host families. My wife does that as well. But as the years have gone on, more people have come on board to do things, taking them off of my plate. I don't have to do nearly the amount of work that I did the first year. First year was crazy. It's a wonder my clients didn't sue me for malpractice and my wife didn't leave me. But so many volunteers have come on board to do a lot of those things that it's a very pleasant experience.
Hey, I almost hate to do this, but I've got to interrupt the conversation for just a minute. Just long enough to remind you all to subscribe, like, and share us. Super important. We are trying to bring the best of the Valley League to anybody, anywhere who wants to hear about it. And we've got a lot of great stories. If you were listening to the Ryan Facto interview we did the other day, you learned that in addition to 1,100 plus players coming out of the Valley Baseball League and going on to play in the majors, we had one NFL player who played in the league and came out and went into the NFL. Go figure. But a big shout out to Riley Cooper for being that one standout. So also want to remind you, if you've got any comments, any ideas, we want to hear them. Don't think you got that across. I want to make that clear. We want to hear them. vbleague@isomermedia.com. vbleague@isomermedia.com. All right, we're going to get back to the conversation, but first we got to give a shout out to our great sponsor, Grace Burrows. She's got another book out. Like, it's number 70 something. I mean, that woman is an amazing writer and she is incredibly prolific. If you haven't read her work, take a look at this. Maybe this will be your first book. All right, now that we've paid tribute to subscribe, like, and share, and anybody who's got a thought to share, and to our super sponsor, Grace Burrows, it's time to get back to the conversation. Well, since we're out talking about names, let's get to a list of names here. Benjamin Dumm, Eric White, Simon Landry, Zach Pete, Tyler Yankowski, Brandon Caranta, and Brad Zebedis. Guys, I mean, you've put together some really amazing teams. We replayed the 2017 Northern Division Championships as a kind of context to frame the conversation with Rick when we tracked him down from the All-Decade team. But 6 guys came off of that team and went pro. I mean, for Parker, for a guy who started with no numbers and no contacts, you're talking to the right people. When you look back at those teams, what do you think hearing those names and knowing what they've gone on to?
Yeah, we've been pretty fortunate. I mean, I think a lot of from a recruiting side, it's having trust in relationships and trust with contacts. A lot of it's luck. We've had a lot of instances where players have dropped off right before the summer, and we've picked a guy up, right before they come, and they've had a tremendous summer. Jordan Tarsevich was an MVP years ago that we signed literally maybe a week before the summer started, just because we lost an outfielder. Happened to talk to VMI that day. They had one, and he went on to be, first team all decade. So we've been fortunate. We have gotten pretty decent over the years at knowing specifically kind of in the North Division what we're looking for in recruiting. As everyone's very quick to mention the dimensions of our park, which you can argue does or doesn't help us. But, we kind of know what we're looking for, and we've been fortunate. And we've had a lot of kids get drafted. We've had a lot of kids actually, arguably what I consider the best player in the Valley League the last decade didn't get drafted in Brandon Caranta. But I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a kid who was better for any Valley League team the last 10 years. So we've been lucky. We've had great coaching staffs. Butch was huge, helping us get off the ground, and then we've progressed with having other younger collegiate coaches every year. So it's been a lot of luck. I spend a lot of time on it, as does Matt, Dad, and everybody who's helped over the years, and it's kind of been a perfect storm.
Right. Well, hey, let's talk about the perfect storm. For a player that's considering, or a coach that's considering sending a player to the Valley, what would you say the reason would be to consider the Express? What do you guys offer? For anybody listening to this, talk to me a little bit about what your game plan is there.
Yeah, I think from a pitching perspective, we offer the ability to tell college coaches that their kids are going to come here, and by the time they leave, they're either going to be able to locate or their numbers are going to be horrible. And at our park, with some of the dimensions being short, you've got to be able to throw at the bottom half of the zone, because if you start elevating it, unless you're have filthy stuff and pumping pretty high numbers on the velo gun, it's going to get hit, and it doesn't take too terribly much to run it out of the park. So from a pitching standpoint, we really can help kids hone in on location, not even so much stuff. We've had great pitchers, Ben Dunn being one, that maybe didn't light up the radar gun, but he could locate everything, and everything he threw moved one direction or the other. So the ability to offer that to schools. And then from an offensive standpoint, we kind of offer the ability for maybe a kid who struggled a tad in the spring to kind of right the ship. You can come to our park, and you maybe don't square it up completely off the bat, but if you hit it 301 feet in the right location, it's going to look good on the stat sheet the next day. And so it's a lot of baseball is a mental game. And if folks hit 220 for their school, mentally they may be down, but the minute they can come to our park and you have one game and go 2 for 4 with, maybe a lazy home run, it changes things pretty quickly. And so just the ability to maybe get kids mentally right with playing on a smaller field is a nice feature.
Yeah, Matt, jump in on that. Anything Parker didn't mention, or anything you want to mention?
Well, Parker dove into specifics to look at it more broadly. One thing we do pitch is the league in general, and how the travel for the league is not very extensive. You're not going on 10-hour road trips to stay 3 nights in a hotel. The furthest trip you're going to have north to south is about 3 hours apart. You're going to be in your own bed every single night. Here you're going to be in a safe, small town community. Not many distractions. Here in Strasburg, we have, I think, 2 or 3 bars, and they usually close by 9 o'clock at night. So when you come to Strasburg for the summer, your focus is baseball. And I know for a fact Parker pitches that pretty heavily when he has to.
Now, but Jay, anything else you want to add to reasons to come?
I just saw a good lesson in why my younger son is in sales, because anybody that can pitch our short fences is being a blessing to pitchers. That's a pretty darn good job. I'm impressed with that. I hadn't heard that before, but I'm impressed.
Yeah, well, you know what? While we're on the subject, for people who don't know the dimensions of your field, lay it out for us. Parker, why don't you spell it out? How big? What are the dimensions?
I guess it depends on what device you use, but we cautiously say maybe 300, 305 down the lines and 365 to center. But one thing I will point out is that you'll find several other folks in the league that are quick to point out our team home run totals and things like that. And we're always quick to mention to folks, as much as maybe our home run numbers get elevated because of our park, you also have to then think our batting average numbers go down, because if you go somewhere like a Harrisonburg, for example, a lazy fly ball that drops over the shortstop's head, that's going to get caught at our park. And so, with the outfielders, left field and right field being closer, hits get taken away that would also be hits on other fields. So, the dimensions help us. We do, I would, as Dad and Matt would know, we recruit to the power game. If you look at our team strikeout numbers and home run numbers, you can clearly see what we recruit for. But it's not all short fences that make our offense what it is every summer.
Well,
And
go ahead, Matt. Did you have something you wanted to add?
yeah, as far as the park's concerned, on a cool night from gap to gap, the ball does not travel as far as you think it would. So you can hit some decent balls to center field on a cooler night and won't go out. So down the lines, it gets up in a hurry pretty fast. From gap to gap, it's not quite as quick.
Gotcha. Well, the idea of this isn't really to focus too much on the field. Although, one thing I do want to say, John Leonard, who's like a stats, we call him the stat man. Stat man. Anyway,
Oh,
he's
that's
been
bad.
no, it is bad, isn't it? That's got to give people a reason to tune in every time.
But I remember the show.
Yeah. Well, it definitely dates me. Long live Adam West. Hey, so seriously, John Leonard's been collecting data on kind of the home run favorability of each of the parks. I know he's getting close to publishing that. So we'll leave that up to him. We're going to run out of time here in a second, but Parker, you mentioned something a little bit ago, kind of what you guys are looking for now. I want to get your take on this. This is something I stumbled on just a little while ago in a recent podcast. John Leonard loves the D3 guys who come to town and get discovered. They might not have gotten any love in their schools, but they come here, they're playing against some good D1 talent. They get noticed and they make it big. Michael Walensky's a player who came out. We just talked to him in a recent podcast. We're going to have that on soon. But anyway, in looking at the matchup between Strasburg and the Tom Sox, one of the things that came up is the Tom Sox had like 5 D3 players on that team. And one of the things that happened from a team dynamic standpoint are those D3 players kind of bonded together and created this kind of cohesive element. And then it became kind of a rallying point around, well, hey, we can play up. When we talk to guys like Sam Perlazzo, he says, if you want to find out what a player can do, you play him up a little bit. I'm just curious, is there something there? Is there a strategy for where the player's coming from that helps your team cohesion? Have you come across anything like that in your recruiting?
From a team cohesion standpoint, yes, there's absolutely a lot of truth to that. Some of the best teams we've had, in 2016, I think we went 30-12 and then 36-13 if you count the playoffs when we won our second straight title. Could have been 3 straight, but you already aired the game that showed it wasn't. But
thanks for that.
Yeah.
But hey, you guys could have had it. Come on, that was one that went 3 games. And it was a
we don't really want to talk about it.
I'm sorry. And you had 6 guys. I'm sorry. 6 guys came off of that team and went pro. To me, that's a success by any measure.
But no, you're right. We recruit heavily for kids kind of if they're not, say, same geographic areas, maybe know each other from high school or college. If you look at a lot of our teams are southern, southeast based, which coincidentally is where I travel a whole lot to for work. So I go watch these kids and the coaches. But we do try to get kids that maybe have known each other from high school, travel ball, whatever it is. To the D3 point, I play D3, Matt played D3. We love D3 kids. I think the one thing to also then notice is that, when you get to an end of a summer where a lot of kids have fallen up, usually the D3 numbers are larger. So, if you look at, say, our roster or Charlottesville's or whomever beginning of the summer, there's likely than not as many D3 kids on there. But D3 has been great to us. We've had 2 pitchers drafted from D3. The Express, who's made it the furthest in the minor leagues, was a guy named Kevin Herget from Keene University, a Division III kid. So it's been great for us. Obviously, Charlottesville's had a lot of success with it with Wolanski and Spears and some of these others. So, but yeah, you're right. We do try to get team cohesion because the quicker they can bond, the better. And if that's already kind of built in with the recruiting, it helps.
Hey, and let's do this. I want to talk a little bit about team building because the value added I think this podcast can bring is, one, we can take families like yours and give advice to somebody who might be thinking about coming into our league and maybe establishing another team. We can talk about how to recruit. We can also talk about team building. Stumbled on kind of a theme for team building. Zach Cole said it best. He said, when you're at the start of the summer, you don't know what you have. And then it can be hard to take a player who's really in the league trying to improve for themselves and get in a better position for college to really focus on the how the team benefits from his participation on that team. Do you guys have any kind of strategy for what you're using to build team cohesion? I know you're trying to bring a team together that at least has some connections. Is there something else you guys do that helps you build your teams?
I can take just a little of that. this happens in all sports. I think it especially happens in baseball, but it happens in all sports. You get guys together. These guys come from all over the country. Parker's right. Most of ours come from the southeast, that neck of the woods. A lot of good baseball played down there. But they come into town, and we've had a lot of players that have known other players from other teams. They played travel ball, so it's nice that they've got a prior connection, but a whole lot of them don't. These guys bond in about 5 seconds. I remember when Matt went off to Presbyterian College down in South Carolina. I mean, we were there for 2 days of orientation. I mean, by the end of the 2 days, these guys were like best buds, and their connection was baseball. They were all on the baseball team. So baseball players bond really, really quickly. And when they're bonded, they want to win. Yeah, they want to improve for their following year, and they're working on that. But these guys bond very quickly, and the team concept is not hard because it's in their blood. It's what they do. It's in their blood. They're best buddies with these guys. I know a lot of guys stay in touch with each other after the season's over, and they remain friends for many years after that. So they get real close real quick.
Matt, anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, when baseball players come to a summer school, they come there to improve themselves. They're not coming there because they want to lay down a sack bunt to get a guy from first to second. They want to get their swings in. But what builds that cohesion and the willingness to do team-oriented things like that is winning. You got to win often and win early. So Parker constructs our roster to make sure we have some horses in town early to make sure we're getting the results in the field that we need to see.
Gotcha. How about Parker? Want to put a bow on it for us?
No, I mean, I think they're both right. I think, we try to recruit where there's some built-in relationships and, cohesion. We also do a lot of, say, community-based events, as every team in the Valley League does. But Matt's right. If you've looked at the Express strategy over the years, we maybe aren't always we always want to win, don't get me wrong, but our goal is always kind of get to that 22 win mark as quickly as possible, preferably in the first 22 games, but get there as quickly as possible and then kind of set up our roster and pitching staff for the playoffs. So we try, as Matt mentioned, and I think Zach Cole mentioned it, it's not always easy to sell a kid in summer ball to put a bunt down. But once you start winning, they start having a good time. They start kind of buying into that team bit by game. By the time you get to the playoffs or game 35, folks are more willing to do that.
So much to talk about. Guys, do me a favor. Hold your hands like this for just 1 second. So I'm seeing some pretty big rings there on Matt's. And tell me about this big rings there. And where's yours, Parker?
Mine are in a trophy case behind me.
In the trophy case. So do us a favor. Talking about winning big and winning early, tell everybody what that ring represents.
Well, this is our 2015 and 2016 VBL championship rings. We came within 6 outs of having a third one, but the gods weren't in our favor that day, the baseball gods. So no, these are just 2 rings. We wear them with pride on certain events, but usually, like Parker, I keep them back in my case as well.
Yeah, they look good. All right, last thing, and then I'll thank you guys for your time and be grateful for the advice and wisdom you shared with all of our fans here. Best Express memory to date. Parker, you want to go first? What's the one memory that stands out above them all?
Besides for the individual championships, I would say the single moment would be, I think it was 2017, actually, to advance to that championship series against the Tom Sox. Jake Perry, a catcher from Lipscomb, hit a walk-off grand slam or walk-off 3-run home run against the Winchester Royals, of all people, to advances there. So that's probably the single best moment. But obviously the championships and the dog piles are always the most fun.
Yeah, that was a moment. Jay, is your moment any different than?
Yeah, mine's actually very different. It'll sound odd considering how successful we've been through the years. But we had, I guess it was 2-3 years ago, and Parker and Matt might have to help me out with the name. But we had a guy staying with us from University of Houston, nice kid. And he threw in the 90s in high school, was a big-time prospect, but his high school coach probably just destroyed his arm. And he was struggling in college. And he came to us in the summer. He's from Houston. He came to us as kind of a last chance to get his pitching stuff worked out. And he was pretty wild. The catcher one night started calling curveballs. And he called him out to the mound and said, "Why are you calling so many curveballs?" He said, "Your fastball is going to kill somebody. At least if you hit him with a curveball, it's not as bad." But he was the greatest guy in the world. Well, unbeknownst to me, his host father, they had been working him out some at first base. And our last game of the season, we played either Haymarket or somewhere down that neck of the woods. And he played first base. He actually played first base pretty well. And his girlfriend was at the game. She was up from Texas, and we were talking to his mother on the phone. And he hits a home run. I mean, he rips a home run to left center. The guy's a pitcher, and he hits a home run. And his teammates loved him. They call him Pops because he was probably 22 by then. But he was very beloved among his teammates. When he hit that home run, it was just a very, very special moment. It eclipses any moment winning a championship. He was rounding the bases. His girlfriend was crying. His mother was screaming on the telephone. And it was just cool. That was my moment.
Yeah, both
Colin
of those.
Garrett was his name.
Well,
Colin Garrett from Baylor.
yeah, Colin Garrett. Great kid.
All right, Matt, how about you? Anything stand out different from what you heard from Parker or your dad?
Parker's Jake Perry moment, the grand slam to go to the finals, kind of takes the cake. But in 2019, it wasn't a moment, more or less the season and the resiliency. We won 10 or 11 games straight, a team record, and jumped out to being ranked 8th in the country. Then we lost, I think, 21 or 22 players from that team for a variety of reasons. And for that team and that staff to be that resilient, to bounce back from losing that many bodies, to go all the way to the championship was pretty special.
Yeah, I'll say, well, it's all special to me. I mean, all those moments were some great baseball. And Jay, I think you said it best. And I've been saying this the last couple of podcasts. Something magic happens when it's for the love of the game. And that magic moment when, somebody stands up and does something just magical. Gentlemen, I can't thank you enough for your time. It's absolutely a pleasure to talk to the Neals about the Strasburg Express dynasty. I know you guys are here to stay, and I know you had a great roster this year. I look forward to seeing them in action next year. Anything else you want to add before we put a bow on it?
No, thank you. Thank you much.
Yep.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Graham.
All right, baseball fans, that's going to do it for us tonight. Hope you enjoyed this glimpse into the Neal dynasty. Yes, there's 65 people plus the 4 Neal family members that helped make the Strasburg Express happen. It doesn't happen in a vacuum, but you got a chance to kind of glimpse into a multi-generational baseball enterprise. And they've had some really amazing success. What a magic moment that 2017 game was. And they were close. I mean, I think that's baseball. And too bad one team has to lose when there's so many winners on both teams. Anyway, look forward to next episode of the Valley Baseball League. We'll be coming at you every night on the YouTube channel at 7 o'clock. We're just days away from the start of our season. We'll be bringing you the best 42 games from 2019. Jordan Simmel will be fronting those with detailed analysis, and we'll be bringing you insight from the managers and coaches and players who played on those teams. So look forward to that starting May 29th, every night on our YouTube channel, 7 o'clock. For the league and the teams in this league, I'm Graham Knight signing off with, we wish you all perfect health, and we wish you all a speedy return to the baseball diamond. We'll see you again tomorrow night. Thanks for watching.